Anyway, on a happier note, I am pleased to say that we have an outstanding speaker this evening, the Register of Deeds, Mr. O'Donnell. He'll be speaking about the new transcription program that actually does bring history to life. And through a state technology grant, the Norfolk County Registry, in collaboration with Xerox, is going back in time all the way from 1793 through 1900 to make land recorded documents easier to read. So I have Mr. O'Donnell's resume, so to speak, and I think it'd take me 10 minutes to read it all. That man is one busy person, let me tell you. With all that he's been involved with in professional memberships, the Registers of Assistant Registers Association. He was a former president, Massachusetts Bar Association. He's part of a member of the Norfolk County Bar Association and an officer, including a president. The Norwood Bar Association, the Massachusetts Register of Deeds Association, and he's involved in the community with the Elks and New England Sinai Hospital Board of Directors. There's a former member, even into the Norwood Little League. When do you sleep, I want to know. On a personal note, he's married as a father of two sons, one son, James, and a daughter, Jennifer, and another son, William. And he's been a lifelong resident of Norfolk County. So I'd like to say welcome to Mr. William O'Donnell. Thank you for coming.
I didn't know if that was my cue. Okay, all right, thanks. Paul's like the director, so I just do as I'm told. It's like being at home sometimes, I guess, yeah. But thanks for having me. My name's Bill O'Donnell. I grew up in Norwood, and it's great coming down to Foxborough. And, you know, a lot of times when I'm talking to groups, and we can talk about some of the modern things that the registry does and issues that consumers are interested in. And I always tell people, you know, and thank you, Joan, for those kind words. You said I was an outstanding speaker, and I'm a little nervous. You know, I always believe, like, when I used to try cases, under-promise and over-deliver. You know, you're kind of over-promised here, outstanding speaker. But a lot of times, you know, the Registry of Deeds is an arm of government many people don't know much about, and certainly don't know what the Registry of Deeds does or what the registry is about. But when you think about it, the biggest asset we have are our homes, and that's what we really deal with. And you know, later on we can get into some of the things that you can do to protect your home, like put a homestead on, or we have a consumer notifications. You know, there's all kinds of frauds going on, so it helps to protect your property against fraud. And there's scams going on, and we try to broadcast that, whether we're here at a historical society like the Foxborough Historical Society, or the senior centers, or some of the other community groups we talk at. Scams are taking place. They solicit from you to pay $60 to $83 to get a copy of your deed. You know, come to, you know, right here. We bring us, you know, the beauty of modernization is we bring the information to you. We can get you a copy of your deed, and you certainly shouldn't be paying anywhere from $60 to $86 for a copy of your deed. And the reason we mention that is because even though we've written to the Attorney General's office and the Secretary of State's office, and we understand it may be legal, but it doesn't make it right. So we just try to, you know, tell people when we come out to community groups like this that there are things going on in the modern world with the registry. But my function today, according to Paul, and I will stick to it, is to talk about history. And you know, certainly the Foxborough Historical Society does a lot to make history come alive, and we've been trying to do that at the Registry of Deeds. I don't tell good jokes or sing or dance, but I guess we have trivia, and Joan was telling me that you had a speaker on this, so hopefully you get the answer. But how many presidents were born in Norfolk County? Four, yeah. An insider. Oh, I see three, but no, Paul, there's always this kid in the class that raises his hand first and has the answers. Paul's that, I guess. But there were 4 presidents born here in Norfolk County. Can anyone name them? Not Paul.
Oh, I don't know.
Adams.
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 And the last person is in all our lifetimes. George
Bush.
Herbert Walker Bush. So it's John Adams, who was the second president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, his son, who was the sixth president of the United States, and we had John F. Kennedy, who was in Brookline, and George Herbert Walker Bush, a lot of people don't realize, was born in Milton. So 4 presidents born here in Norfolk County, and that's why they call it the County of Presidents. There is a moniker out there that Norfolk County is the County of Presidents. Does anyone know the year Norfolk County was founded? See, this is what makes me good at cocktail parties. I can't tell you trivia. Even with my hockey team afterwards, we go out afterwards. You know, when things get slow, we start talking about trivia. Well, 1793. Norfolk County was established in 1793. And does anyone know who the governor was that signed the legislation creating Norfolk County? Well, it was Governor John Hancock. And, you know, I always say maybe this was the second most important document he signed. He was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And he signed legislation on March 26, 1793, in Norfolk County, to establish Norfolk County on June 20th, 1793. And the reason I mention this is we'll be sending out invitations. We're sending them out to the historical societies and commissions, and we're having an open house because we're going to celebrate the 225th year of Norfolk County at the Registry of Deeds on June 20th, 2018. So 225 years ago, Governor Hancock signed legislation and got Norfolk County going. And our building, and you can see it's a beautiful building on the front cover. It was established and started to be built in 1903. And it's a wonderful historic building, and the maintenance and facilities people do a nice job at taking care of that building. But we're going to have an open house, so from 4 to 6:30, you're welcome to come. And the open house sort of is probably between 4 and quarter of 5. You know, people can wander around and go through the registry. Well, what will you be looking at? Well, we try to do storyboards. As a matter of fact, it was suggested from people from Foxboro to do a storyboard on the Boyden brothers, whose library we're here. What we tried to do, there are 28 communities that make up Norfolk County, and we tried to pick whether it was a political person, a public service person, a military person, just someone of interest. And we've done storyboards. We've done storyboards on the 4 presidents. We've done storyboards on Governor Hancock, and we actually have the actual a copy of the legislation established in Norfolk County, and you can see John Hancock's signature. So at the open house, you can read through some of these storyboards, and it's been pretty interesting. I mean, I'm probably not as into history as you people are, but I enjoyed history. I went down, I went to school at Severe Brothers High School in Westwood, but I went to school down Georgetown University down in Washington and took history. I majored in American government and economics, but you know, Washington was full of history. So I do have a special place for history, and that's what we've tried to do at the registry in this 225th anniversary celebration. For instance, in Dedham, there was a Supreme Court justice that had property there. So we've tried to tie some of these people to property, and it was Louis Brandeis. Helen Keller owned property in Rentham, so we have a little board about her. I still try to run. My kids are older, so I don't run as well as when I was younger, that's for sure. But at the Falmouth Road Race, I met an astronaut from Needham, Sunita Williams, whose family, she grew up in Needham. So we have a storyboard about her. So we've tried to, you know, pick some modern people, you know, in this, just a lot of great history. And some of it, we've gone Hollywood, Lee Remick. She owned property in Quincy. Believe it or not, Grizzly Adams owned property in Medway. So we have some interesting boards, and you're welcome to come by the registry on Wednesday, as I said, from 4 to 6:30. Not only do we have the history boards going, but there's a retired state trooper, Trooper Clark, Dan Clark, and he's a singer. He sings all different kinds of songs, he's probably going to be gearing it more to patriotic songs. But anyone who's watched him, he puts on a pretty good show, and he's coming by the registry to sing, and we have cake and refreshments. So it's a great 225th birthday, so you're welcome to come by. How does this tie into the transcription project that Joan mentioned? When I became registered, clearly there was a lot of things that I wanted to do. And when I still play hockey, believe it or not, I still coach. I coach a women's club team over at BC. And one thing I learned in sports, there's no I in team. So when I talk about the things that were done, it was because I have a great staff. I have 2 staff members here today, Alicia Gardner and Bob Glenn. So the staff makes it happen. You know, you can come up with ideas, but you need people to kind of run with the ideas. And one of the ideas was to modernize the registry. But how does that tie into history? Well, when I got there, it was all books. And Paul asked me, do they still have the books? We're still one of the few registries that print the books. So you can go back to book 1, page 1, which is back to 1793, which coincidentally on that page was a deed from Foxborough. The very first document that was recorded in Norfolk County and at the Registry of Deeds was a deed involving Foxborough property. So in becoming registered, and it's taken a while, and I've enjoyed the process, it was a challenge. You know, we were just trying to get documents on. When I got there was a year's worth of mail sitting there. These are people, you know, whose documents, you know, your houses are being recorded, or mortgages needed to be recorded. And so when I started the modernization, and when the team started the modernization effort, it was to put a new document management system in, a new computer system in, to deal with the modern reality of trying to run a government operation like a business. People rely on the registry for real estate, rely on, you look at, if you go to sell your homes, if you can't rely on the records or commercial development, it's not going to happen. So that's our principal, you know, function, is the real estate economy. But I like history, and what I've tried to do is use the modernization to make history come alive. That's what the transcription project did. When we brought our documents and started recording them, but we started putting them online. So if you go to www.norfolkdeeds.org, you can look all this information up now. It didn't start that way. We have just finished a lot of these projects, so it's kind of timely to come here and talk to you about them. But we worked our way back. At first it was the 1990s and the 1970s. We're back to 1793. So, and how are we back? Well, our indexes are completely indexed back to 1793. So if you go online, and we just had a computer seminar, so check our website. We invite people, the historical societies and commissions, we sent a letter to come by, we just geared it for them. And we also do one for the public. We've done 2 in May. So check our website, whether it's in the spring or the fall. We have these computer seminars where we teach people how to do the research. And in this green folder on the right-hand side, there is some information if you're so inclined to do your own research, the Norfolk Deeds Computer Assisted Research Guide. When we do these seminars, a lot of the people say, hey, I took that home and I kind of looked through it and took some notes, and it was very helpful. Because you can do this research from your home. Now, we're indexed back to year 1, back to 1793. So if you ran my name, Bill O'Donnell, every Bill O'Donnell back to 1793 comes out, and you can start looking up the information. You're probably better off, and we did it at the computer seminar, we indexed John Adams, and you see all the properties that John Adams had. You could see the deed that John Adams, 2nd President of the United States, deeded to his son, the 6th President of the United States. There's another deed where John Adams deeded land to the town of Quincy, and he spoke about his fellow patriot, John Hancock, and what a great contribution John Hancock made to the founding of the United States of America. So there's a lot of great information in these deeds, and you can view them. So if you go on our website, www.norfolkdeeds.org, and you entered, for instance, book 1, page 1, the first document from 1793, which is that Foxborough deed, is viewable. We have over 6 million images in our library that are viewable. And the index, as I said, we have the old scanned indexes too, the old indexes. We put the old indexes on because some people like to go through the old indexes, so they're online too. But if you want to do research, go to our website, and again, we're back to 1793. So what's this transcription project? Well, it started because of my interest in history. We had gotten back to year one, and we put everything out online, so every document is out online, whether it was recorded in 1793 or today, 2018. All our information is online, and you can look it up. But again, we're one of the few registries that still print books. There's 21 registries around Massachusetts, and not all of them print books. We still print the books. So if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, Paul was telling me how he used to go to the registry and go through the books, you can. The beauty of the computer is what probably would take someone a week to look up information can really be streamlined with the advances in technology. Well, the transcription project, from 1793 to 1900, it was an era of quill pens. The person with the best penmanship got the job at the registry to handwrite the documents that came in. There was no copy machines, so when a document got brought in, the original document would be presented, and the scrivener would handwrite out the document and then hand back the original. Well, when you consider from 1793 to 1900, all the documents were handwritten. And you could see it was kind of tough to read. So one of the reasons I tried to marshal the forces and finally got it to all come together on this transcription project was, for one, it's hard to read the documents. And certainly the lawyers that have to certify titles and do research, they were having issues reading these documents. And the beauty of them being on the computer, you could zoom in and zoom out, but my goodness, your eyes would probably be going blind. But at least you can do it with the computers. But what we did is we transcribed every one of these documents from 1793 to 1900. We started with the deeds because we figured that's what people would be interested in, and then we just kept going. And one of the reasons that we do it to 1900, Register Burdekin, there's only been 11 registers, but in 1900 he probably went around Foxborough talking about his modernization initiatives. It was the typewriter. They started typing January 1st, 1900, so they were actually working New Year's Eve, and the documents were typed. But all those handwritten documents were hard to read. So we started transcribing them because I thought it would be good, just for the economy, for the real estate attorneys, and also I had an interest in history. And I thought there was a lot of information in these documents, a lot of historical figures here in Norfolk County. You can look up the Paul Revere's deed in Canton. But history can't come alive if you can't read the documents. So what we've done, and you can kind of see it in this green sheet, we started transcribing all the documents. So back to book 1, page 1. If you went to book 1, page 1, the document from Foxboro is viewable online. If you hit another, if there's another icon on your computer, it almost looks like a quill pen. It's supposed to look like a quill pen. If you hit that button, the typed version comes out. So what we've done is on the right side of your handout, and we also kind of outlined our old documents transcribed. What we've done, you could see side to side what it looks like. So you can look up the Adams deed, and some of it's really well handwritten. The penmanship's good, but it's typed out. Now, we have gotten great response from historical people, from people who do historical and genealogical research. They love it because they can read the documents. And it was kind of funny. Joan mentioned I had 3 children. My youngest is a junior in college. But when we started this project, about 4 years ago, when he was graduating from high school 3 years ago, I noticed a lot of his classmates, they don't know. I went to St. Catherine's. You knew how to write penmanship. No one knows penmanship anymore. And that's another issue for another day, whether generations can read penmanship or cursive. But as I've gone on with this project, at least I'll feel comfortable in the future. People will be able to read the text. I think it's unfortunate that they can't read cursive. I hope that doesn't go by the way. But I did notice, and it's something to consider, a couple of generations from now, people might not know how to read cursive the way it's going, which is unfortunate. But anyway, if you look at this document, you'll see we have the handwritten document and the transcribed document. So that's what we did from 1793 to 1900. There was over 450,000 documents that were transcribed, and we just finished it up. So it's timely we're here today. We are indexed back to 1793. We are finished with that project. We're completely transcribed. So every document from 1793 to 1900 has been transcribed from penmanship to easy-to-read text, and you can view the documents. And for those who want to learn more, there's a couple of, and people have kind of responded to it. There was the Quincy Sun did an article, the Patriot Ledger did an article, the Boston Globe and the Globe South and Globe West magazine, we attached some of the articles where, they did an article about the transcription project, and I certainly hope, and if anyone has any questions, that groups like the historical societies and commissions will take advantage and look up the information. And believe me, we still do it the old-fashioned way at the registry. I remember, talking about modernization, and my father, who just recently passed away at 87, but he climbed poles for the Boston Edison for 38 years, and say, well, you're doing all this modernization, but remember, some of us don't know anything about computers, don't want to know anything about computers, don't care to know anything about computers. So we have a customer service center. That's one thing I created when I became register, which is you can call up that number, 781-461-6101, and they can answer some questions, look up some information, see if your mortgage has been discharged, or in the historical context, if you have any questions or need a copy of anything, you can either call them up or come by the registry. We welcome you there. It's at 649 High Street in Dedham. It's across from the Gold Dome Superior Court. Or just check our website, or the newspapers have been great. Or I want to thank Foxborough Cable for televising this. They've been great about publicizing when we have office hours. For instance, a lot of times we go to all the town halls. I know in Foxborough, we used to go to the town hall, then you were doing renovations, and we go to the public safety building. And we have office hours where we have our computers, and fellow residents from Norfolk County or from here in Foxborough come by, and they need a copy of a deed, or they need to look up whether they have a homestead recorded or a discharge was filed on their mortgage. We can look that information up, and we certainly will do that after the talk tonight, if we have Alicia and Bob here to help with any real estate issues or copies of documents that you want. As far as, and again, that's some of the historical information that we have out there. Again, the transcription project, I think we're very proud. I think when I look back, the two things I'll be proudest about is, for the first time, we had internet land record research, that we brought it to the Registry of Deeds using the advances in technology. That now you can record, attorneys here in Foxborough can do a closing in their office here in Foxborough and transmit the documents to be recorded. So electronic recording, that's something we're very proud of. But I really believe this transcription project, we were the first registry in New England that said to do it. And certainly I know none of the registries and my fellow registers have done it here in Massachusetts, but to transcribe the handwritten documents. And I think looking back, that's something, because I do love history, and people note it. I got a note from David McCulloch, who was a noted historian and author, mentioning, how he spent years looking through, handwritten stuff, and to have it in a type form is just a great resource, and that's what we want to be at the Registry of Deeds, a resource for people like yourselves that are interested in history. I will say this, we're also a resource, and I will go back to the modern part of the speech. Consider, if you don't have a homestead, we have information here about a Homestead Act. It's the state legislature writes it so that you can protect your principal residence against certain creditors, and it's something you should consider. As you heard, I'm an attorney. I worked as an assistant district attorney, but after the district attorney's office, I had my own law practice in Norwood. And I think sometimes attorneys get a bad rap. You ask them for 10 different, you get 10 different opinions on something, but I would say 9.9 out of 10 would say consumers should consider having a homestead recorded to protect their property. Maybe they'll never need it, but it doesn't hurt to have it. And again, we have information about that online, but we also have information on the homestead in the green sheet. Mortgage discharges, again in your green book. We all have to borrow money. I know you mentioned I have 3 children, going to college, you borrow money. Well, make sure when you pay off your mortgage, whether you're refinanced or you're lucky enough to have that last mortgage getting paid off, that a mortgage discharge gets recorded. People, the bank records a mortgage to make sure they get your money. If you don't pay, they're gonna foreclose on you. But if you pay them off, the community banks, and I'm a big believer in community banking, you've got great community banks here in Foxborough, they'll get you the discharge. If the discharge isn't recorded, you go down to the local branch, they'll help you out. But some of these bigger banks, it's kind of hard to get an answer. And we have a document in this green folder, Where Has My Bank Gone?, which gives you federal and state contact information to try to locate that bank that's merged 8 times, or people forget in the 1990s, some of them went out of business, so that you can try to track that mortgage discharge, because the mortgage discharge is only a 1 or 2 page document, but when it gets recorded, it tells the world that your mortgage has been paid off. Another plug I'll put for the modern, the modern era, as opposed to the historical information we're talking about, we have an anti-fraud consumer notification service. And you could sign up for an email notification if something comes across the registry with your name. Now, I've signed up myself. Now, I'm William Patrick O'Donnell, but I get an email for any William O'Donnell document that comes through the registry. And some people might think it's inconvenient, but when you consider, the FBI says the fastest growing white collar crime is property fraud and mortgage fraud. So I get these emails, and it says a document was filed in William O'Donnell's name. I look it up. Now, if you're not good at looking it up on the computer, you can call our customer service department. And sometimes it's William J. O'Donnell, sometimes it's William F. O'Donnell, and it hasn't been me. But the one time it could be, I look it up and I'm like, wait a minute, that's the deed to my house. I didn't sign that. Or that's a mortgage on my house. How did that get signed? Now, we're not going to prevent the fraud, but at least you can get on it sooner, and I want that to be clear. We live, unfortunately, I saw it in the district attorney's office, people take advantage of people. And there are more, there's more creativity on frauds in this day and age than ever before. And we can't prevent that fraud. But if I get that email, now we have on our website contact information for the law enforcement agencies around Norfolk County, that you can get a hold of them and get on that fraud right away. So again, that's my pitch to the modern era. I know I'm here to talk about history, but those are some of the things we've done at the registry to be relevant. Those are some of the things we try to do besides our day-to-day job of making sure the documents get recorded accurately and securely and efficiently. But I love history, and it was great to be here talking about history. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Paul, if I missed anything, let me know. Yes, Joan?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but I had a personal experience myself. You had been talking up at the senior center a number of years ago, and I don't know if it was Bob or not, or Alicia, but anyway, you had some people there, and you said the same thing. If you want to look up your mortgage or the deed on your house, go ahead. So I did, and I found out somebody had taken out a lien on my house for $30,000, and I had no knowledge of it whatsoever. And anyway, come to find out that was all fraud, and I got a kick out of your one flyer there, where's my bank gone? Well, it happened at Shawmut Bank, and so when I started investigating that, and it went down through all these different banks and bank after another, and finally Bank of America was where it landed. So long story, but I finally had that wiped off, but it was because of your office's efforts, and had that on line. I talked to the police chief about it and all of that, and it was even notarized, and it was my signature, and I didn't sign it, and how that all happened, I don't know, but
and you might say, thank you very much, and you might say, why do they do that? Because just say it's an equity line, the person is committing the fraud probably accessed the equity line, and I'm sure the bank, and we all pay for that. I'm sure whoever did the fraud, wrote some checks on the equity line to cash it out.
Actually, because on I didn't have a mortgage at the time.
Right.
They were able to take that money out of the value of the house, I guess.
Right,
But,
and it happens, and that's why we created this, consumer notification, and again, I recognize a lot of people find even emails intrusive, but on
That's
something, it's your house, it's your biggest asset you have, and to me, it's a small price to get an email and to just be on the safe side, because most people, the only time they're aware that most of the time, the only time a title search gets done in your house is when you're going to
Right.
refinance or you're going to sell your house, or whoever's buying your house does it. No one thinks to check it. That's the beauty, you can check it. You can just run your name, or if you see us at office hours around the county, we'll run it for you, because people come by and say, hey, will you just run my name? I just want to see what's on it. But the consumer notification service would at least put you on an email, to check.
What would, you're being a lawyer, what would have happened, say I died, and then my children were going to sell the house, and then this was discovered, and then they wouldn't know that maybe I might have done that. But my husband was already deceased, and they wouldn't have known. So what?
And you might, that's something that could have happened, because,
Yeah.
you see it, you figured, oh, unless they were like, oh, that doesn't look like Mom's signature.
It did.
See, well, they were that good. So, yes, you could see where family members might say, geez, Mom must have went to Foxwoods or something. I don't know. What was going on there? But, the kids probably would just see, hey, there's a mortgage, Mom probably borrowed the money, and off it goes. And in that case, the one that's getting hurt would be your kids, because
That's right.
Charmotte's getting paid for something they should never have allowed to happen. Charlotte was responsible, and that's where I'm kind of at, when I mention community banks. There's a lot of great community banks around Norfolk County. I love going to those local banks, and I think sometimes the laws and even the federal legislation, they overregulate the little community banks, and the big banks like the Bank of Americas and Charlotte that, people forget in 2008, 2009, got this country in trouble. Sometimes with respect to recording, they do things that really, I think, hurt the integrity of the recording system. And let me tell you, the local community banks would make sure that whoever's signing this was the person, and they would do a title search. Some of those bigger banks would just send in mass all these equity lines without even doing title searches. And so that's why I'm a big believer in the local, smaller community banks. But that's why we put that document, where has my bank gone? And probably you saw it. When you just can't find anyone in some of these bigger banks to answer your question or to help you out. But that's why we put that federal and state contact information, so you can at least, you gotta haunt them, but I'm sorry you had to go through that, but probably you're the poster child for why you should probably consider signing up for that consumer notification service.
Well, because of you.
Thanks. Well, we've come a long way. Back then, we just happened to discover it, and now with the technology and with some of the advances, we were able to kind of put a system together that hopefully helps the consumers here in Norfolk County. But thanks. Yes?
We have an older home, and in the deed, the original deed, it references a tenement. What was a tenement?
A tenancy?
A tenement.
A tenement?
A tenement, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it.
I
No, I
noticed in the example here, the transcription somewhere, it said, in the abstract, it just caught my eye, and I thought it said,
Well, I'll have to check that tenement, because sometimes there's tenancies.
no.
That's a legal thing that, sometimes when spouses are married, it's, tenants by the entirety. Tenants in common is when you split it. If I had a property with my brother and it was tenants in common, my heirs would get my half and his heirs would get his. So I've heard of tenancies, and and that's why we see people coming in trying to do deeds on their own. And I always say I hate paying a plumber when I have plumbing problems. Like, if you're doing stuff with your house and deeding things, you might want to, consider getting an attorney. And that's not, to plug the attorneys, it's the biggest asset you have. And sometimes just wording a tenancy could be the difference between, if it's jointly, if I pass away, it would go to my brother. But if it's tenants in common, my heirs would be getting my half, and then, my brother's dealing with my heirs. So there's all kinds of things like that. But tenements, I'm gonna have to check on that
How does
one.
that spell?
It's on.
Tenement, it
How does
says
it spell?
John Quincy Adams and his heirs and assigns all that part of the lands, tenements, and hard tenements of the late
Well,
North Quincy.
tenement, if it's tenement.
It
that
could be a
word
share,
means-
you know.
That means a building.
Yeah.
So they refer to, I would interpret that as meaning a tenement is usually a building.
Yeah,
So it might have been like a group of apartments, like a tenement.
yeah, a house is a single-family house.
But maybe at one time, there were groups of people that lived there.
Well,
And
it
it was
was-
like a tenement building.
It was originally built by a lawyer for his widowed mother. So it was built as a single-family house. But I didn't know if it was because his mother maybe was paying rent to him for it, so it was a rental, I don't know.
Well, I don't know, that's something, it could be the function of history. And that's the beauty of reading these documents. There was one deed, it was between two brothers, and it was funny, they used to describe what you did, and they had one brother who was getting the property as successful businessman, and they described his brother insolvent debtor, so they had there's all kinds of things in there, there's, references to what people did, and it's kind of interesting. Now, they just have the names, but back then they would describe, what people did, and there's some interesting information, and hopefully, as we said, and there's a quote in there, history can't come alive if you can't read the documents, and that's why we did the transcription project. So groups like yours can make the documents come alive by reading them, and hopefully you find it worthwhile. It was a worthwhile project, we enjoyed it, but hopefully you'll find it worthwhile as well. Yes?
I was wondering if you had to hire extra staff to do this transcription process.
It was a combination of staff, and we also did it in conjunction, it doesn't make, I'm elected as a Democrat, but I kind of run the place like a Republican, you run it like a business. It doesn't make sense to put all these people on just for one project. So some of this, we had staff involved, but also we outsourced a lot of it to Xerox. They were very happy to be part of the project, and now they're, trying to get other registries nationwide to do it. They say we were the first in New England. Xerox says that they haven't found anyone else that's done it, so they're trying to market it as something that other registries across the country should consider. Yes?
I'm a native Foxborough resident, but we moved to Rentham about 5 years ago, and I know you don't remember me, you might remember me, but we came over to see you about a couple of things, about the Homestead Act for one thing, and you helped us with a few other items. We bought a 1714 house in Rentham. We lived in South Foxborough for 42 years and had a chance to buy a real piece of history in Rentham. It was the Guile Colic house on Route 140, and Mr. Colic was at the State House in Boston for a number of years, 1804, but the first owner built it in 1714, and the first deed that I found was from January 12th, 1714, and he paid a sum of 50,000 pounds, which to me sounded like an awful lot of money way back in those days. Who knows what
I don't know what the conversion.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But what was interesting, the only deed I have really is this original one, and the handwriting is incredible. You can almost read every word. And some of them are so, like you said before, so unbelievably bad, you can't read a thing. But it's amazing how things, he's gone on and on what he's going to leave to different sons. And it's not only property, which he's laid out, but it's farm implements and things, furniture items and things like that. It's not only land he's gonna divvy up, but, clothing and, wagons and things like that. It's just simply incredible. And,
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, and I'm glad we helped you out there, because that's one of the things I found in the documents. It's not just, oh, the land was sold.
right,
You get a sense of what was in a place back in 1800. A lot of these deeds name everything from the hearth to, just the different items, like you mentioned,
Lots.
utensils,
Yeah.
and so you really get a sense of, I guess in a way, how lucky we are now. Things we take for granted, what was in a house wasn't, it was tough living back then.
so my question is, how would I go from 1793 back to 1714? Could the town of Rentham help me if I went to town hall and rent them?
You could try, but as far as land records, I
Yeah.
think the next stop for you would be Suffolk County, which is another
Okay.
storyboard
Right.
for our party on June 20th. We did a storyboard about Norfolk County, but what people don't realize is Norfolk County was established from Suffolk County.
Exactly.
And what people don't also realize is there are some communities, people go, why on your computer do you have Hyde Park and Dorchester
You'll find Dedham.
and Roxbury? Actually, no, Dorchester was separate. It became part of Norfolk County in 1793. Roxbury, Dorchester. A lot of them then went back into the city. The last one in 1911 was Hyde Park. But everyone looks at a map in Norfolk County and says, why is Brookline by itself?
Yeah.
Well, at one time, all that land was connected. So, because Dorchester, Roxbury, and South Boston was part of Dorchester. So at one time, South Boston was even part of Norfolk County. Some of the communities went back into Boston. If you look at the map and you see the map of Norfolk County, they say, well, what happened? Cohasset's by itself. Well, right before John Hancock signed the legislation for 1793, Hingham and Hyde Park filed a bill that got passed right before he signed it, excluding Hingham and Hull. They wanted to be part of Norfolk County, and then I think they decided their maritime interests were probably better served, because Norfolk County was considered an agrarian, kind of a farming area. The Shire town was out in Dedham, and also, anecdotally, they said that they felt, riding on horseback into Dedham was going to be an inconvenience. So Hingham and Hull opted out of Norfolk County, but Cohasset stayed in for whatever reason.
Foxborough was even part of Rentham back when this house was built.
Yes, and you could find, some of the community, like for instance, you can look up records in my hometown of Norwood. I've done it for friends, and I'm like, wow, I can't find the plan. And then, like Dawn's, Norwood became a community in 1872. The plan
It's
predated
new, yeah.
1872, so
Yeah.
Norwood was South Dedham.
Right.
And you could find that with a lot of the communities. Holbrook was East Randolph, so some of the annexation dates. But there's 28 communities here in Norfolk County, and we've done a history board for each of them for that
Right.
party.
Well, are you saying that if you want to go back to 1714, you have to go to Suffolk County, you don't carry the record?
Yeah, let me finish that thought. Thank you for bringing me back, Paul. Before, Norfolk County started in 1793, so it was part of Suffolk County. So I would head to Suffolk County, or the Secretary of State's office has the archives out in Columbia Point. Excuse me, so maybe some of that, it could be there.
Galvin's office?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Secretary Galvin's office. So they have a lot of records at the archives at Columbia Point, but I would also see if maybe I could, go to Suffolk County. Because it's interesting, sometimes people that are doing research in Suffolk County have to come to Norfolk County, because for that period of time, Dorchester was part of Norfolk County. So they're researching in Suffolk,
Yeah.
coming to Norfolk, and then going back to Suffolk for the more, once they went back into
Yeah.
the city. So it's a lot of great history, and if anyone has any other questions, be happy to take it. Or if you need us to look up any information for you, we can use the computers. That's the beauty of the modernization. We try to bring the registry into people's homes and businesses, and we go out to community groups, so we'll be happy to look up any information you want. But thanks very much for having me. I enjoyed speaking with you. And thanks to Foxborough Cable for filming this. That's nice.
Thank you very
Oh,
much for coming, we
okay.
appreciate
Well,
that. You really covered a lot of
Thanks,
ground.
Jim. Okay, thanks,
Thank you all for being